Hello, my dear students. In today's video, we are going to discuss all the important extracts from Julius Caesar Act 1 and Act 2. So please make sure you watch this video until the end because we're going to discuss the extract and the questions that could come from it. So let's come to the first extract. Hence, home, you idle creatures, get you home. Is this a holiday? What? Know you not? Being mechanical, you ought not walk upon a laboring day without the sign of your profession. Speak, what trade art thou? So this is the extract. The first question is, who says the following lines to whom? So all of you would know this is from Act 1, Scene 1, the very first lines from the scene. So these lines were said by Flavius to the commoners who were on the streets. The second question, what were the common people doing? So what were the commoners on the street doing? The commoners on the street, or the commoners are on the street to rejoice in Julius Caesar's triumph and his return to Rome after defeating Pompey. They are wearing their best clothes and have taken a day off from their jobs to watch the procession. Sorry, it isn't profession, it's procession. So basically, what is the context of this extract? Here, the commoners are confronted by the tribunes. Who are the two tribunes? Flavius and Marullus, for their fickle shift in loyalty from Pompey to Caesar. The third question is, what was the profession of the first commoner? So even when I have taught the line by line explanation, one of the ways I asked you to remember is, the first commoner is a carpenter and the second commoner is a cobbler. So the way to remember is first A comes and after that O comes. So first commoner is a carpenter and then it is a cobbler. Okay, so shall we proceed to the next one? Marullus says, wherefore rejoice? What conquest brings he home? What tributaries follow him to Rome? To grace in captive bonds his chariot wheels? You blocks, you stones, you worse than senseless things. Oh, you hard hearts, you cruel men of Rome. Again, this is a very important extract. Okay, the first question, why is Marullus calling them cruel men of Rome? And what does he remind them? So this is the answer that I have written. Marullus is insulting the commoners for being fickle-minded and having an inanimate nature, because just months before they were cheering for Pompey himself. He reminds them that many a times they have climbed up the walls and battlements, towers, windows, chimney tops, with infants in their arms. They sat the whole day patiently waiting for Pompey to pass the streets. But now they have worn their best attire, picked a holiday, and strewed flowers on the way that comes in triumph over Pompey's blood. So this is why Marullus is calling them cruel men of Rome. What is the reference of River Tiber made by Marullus? So the reference of River Tiber made by Marullus is that when the commoners saw the chariot appear of Pompey, they made a universal shout so loud that Tiber trembled underneath her banks and made her shores concave. So that is the reference of River Tiber. Next, what does Flavius ask the commoners to do? Flavius asks all the countrymen to gather around the banks of the river Tiber and to weep their tears into the channel until the lowest stream kisses the most elevated shores of all. And can you recall what Marullus had told the commoners to do? Marullus had told them, run to your houses, fall upon your knees, and pray to the gods to intermit the plague that will inevitably fall on this because of this ingratitude. So I hope you can recall all these answers. Coming to yet another important extract. These growing feathers plucked from Caesar's wing will make him fly an ordinary pitch. Who else would soar above the view of men and keep us all in servile fearfulness? Who says the following lines? So, can you recall who says? It is Flavius who says the following lines. What does he mean by the above lines? So, the feathers represent the decorations, trophies that give Caesar authority. So, he says that by plucking them, it symbolizes removing the symbols of Caesar's power and prevent him from becoming a dictator. He might soar above others. So, he says that if we do not pluck the feathers now, he might soar above others and keep all in a state of fear and servitude. So he says that it is imperative that these growing feathers must be plucked from Caesar's wing. The next question, after talking to the commoners, where do they plan to go and do what? So Flavius asked Marullus to go to the way of the capital and Flavius would go on the other way. And what would they do? They would disrobe the statues that are decorated with celebratory decoration. But we all know, unfortunately, while they were caught doing so, they were put to death or they were silenced. The next extract is of Cassius telling Brutus, Brutus, I do observe you now of late. I have not from your eyes that gentleness and show of love as I was wont to have. You bear too stubborn and too strange a hand over your friend that loves you. So the first question is, what does Cassius tell Brutus in the above lines? What is he trying to infer? So Cassius says that he no longer sees the kindness and affection in Brutus's eyes that he used to see. So he's saying that Brutus is rough and unfriendly and keeping distance with a friend who loves him dearly. The next question, what does Brutus say is troubling him? How does he console Cassius? So, what is troubling Brutus? Brutus tells Cassius not to be mistaken if he has concealed his emotions. It is because he is troubled with emotions that are unique to himself, that is unique to Brutus, which might have had an effect on his behavior. So, Brutus says that he is at war with himself and forgets to show his love to others. He consoles Cassius by telling Cassius, you are one among my good friends, so do not be upset. The next question is, what aspect in this scene shows that Julius Caesar is superstitious? So this is Act 1, Scene 2. In the beginning of the scene, we can see that Julius Caesar is superstitious. So how? Caesar asks his wife Calpurnia to stand right in Antony's path while he runs the race so that Antony can touch her while he runs. So there is a superstitious belief that if a runner touches a barren woman who cannot conceive, their curse of infertility will be lifted. So hence, if Caesar is asking Calpurnia to stand on Antony's way so that Antony can touch her while running the race, shows that Caesar is superstitious. Another important extract where Cassius tells, it's just And it is very much lamented, Brutus, that you have no such mirrors as will turn your hidden worthiness into your eye, that you might see your shadow. I have heard where many of the best respect in Rome, except immortal Caesar, speaking of Brutus and groaning underneath this age's yoke, have wished the noble Brutus had his eyes. So, first question, since Brutus cannot see himself, what does Cassius say would he do? So Cassius says that since Brutus does not have a mirror that can reflect his hidden worthiness and cannot see himself as clearly by reflection, Cassius will be his mirror and modestly reveal parts of Brutus that he is not aware of himself. So Cassius will be a mirror and he will reveal the parts of Brutus that he himself is not aware of. Next question. What actions, if Cassius does, can Brutus hold him to be dangerous? So Cassius asks Brutus not to be suspicious of him. Cassius says if he was a flatterer or if he used to swear his love with common oaths to everyone who asked for it, or if he fawns over men and hugs them tightly and then defame them, or if he indulges in excessive banqueting and is a part of the crowd, then Brutus can consider him dangerous. But he says that he doesn't do any of these, and hence Brutus needn't be suspicious of him. Now, coming to another important extract. If it be aught towards the general good, set honor in one eye and death in the other, and I will look on both indifferently. For let the gods so speed me as I love the name of honor more than I fear death. Who says the following lines to whom? Again, very famous lines. So these lines are said by Brutus to Cassius. Second question, why does he say the following lines? So, Brutus weighs personal honor equally against death. He is committed to doing what is right for the general good of the public, and he values honor more than he fears death. Why does Cassius say honor is the subject of my story? What incidents does he share with Brutus regarding Caesar? So Cassius argues that he and Brutus are as noble as Caesar, yet are forced to live in awe of a man who is physically weak and no better than them. Can you recall the points that Cassius mentioned that proves that Caesar was not exceptional but a common man like both of them? So, what does Cassius tell Brutus? I was born free like Caesar, and so were you. Then why are we standing in awe of a man who's not better than myself? So he says that we have both been fed well and we can both endure the cold of winter as Caesar can. So the first anecdote that he shares is he says that once on a raw and gusty day when the Tiber was chafing against its banks, Caesar challenged Cassius to jump into this angry flood and swim to a point. Then Cassius immediately jumped into the water when the torrent roared and they battled with strong muscles. Finally, before they could reach the proposed point, Caesar cried out and asked Cassius for help. He says, help me, Cassius, or I shall sink. And then Cassius, like Aeneas, our great ancestor, bore the old Anchises from the flames of Troy on his shoulders. Cassius saved Caesar's life from the waves of the Tiber, and this man is now called a god, and Cassius is only a wretched creature who must bow his body if Caesar carelessly nods at him. Then he talks about another instance where Caesar had fever when he was in Spain, and when the fit was on him, he noticed how Caesar shook. His cowardly lips lost their color, and the eyes that command the respect of the world lost its shine, and he was groaning and crying. And he also cried, saying, "Give me some drink, Titanus, like a sick girl." So Cassius says that it amazes him that a man of such a weak character should rise above the majestic world and hold the victory alone. So these are the two instances that he mentions to Brutus, saying that there is nothing special about Caesar. The next extract, Cassius says, "Why, man, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings." Oh, again, very, very important extract. So, why does Cassius say the above lines, and what does he want to convey to Brutus? So, Cassius described Caesar as the Colossus of Rhodes and contrasts Caesar's massive stature with their insignificance, where they are forced to walk below him as powerless underlings who are finding a quiet spot to die, insignificant and forgotten. So here through the above lines, Cassius wants to highlight Caesar's overwhelming power, his arrogance, and how he treats his people as petty and insignificant men, and how he is superior to others. So here Cassius wants to tell Brutus that they are responsible for their own fates and actions rather than them trying to be helpless. The next question, what figure of speech is used in the above line? So if you can see here, he that bestride the narrow world like a colossus. So simile is used here, comparing Caesar to a giant, suggesting that he towers over the Roman world. Then he is calling them petty men. So comparing Brutus, Cassius and all the people as petty men, metaphor is used. Then allusion is used. Allusion is the reference of something famous. So here the reference of the Colossus of Rhodes, which is a massive ancient structure of the god Helios, reinforces the image of Caesar, who is larger than life here. So allusion is comparing something to either a famous story, a famous fairy tale, or something like that. Then imagery is used, where you get an image of Caesar who is so huge and colossal, where Brutus and Cassius are very small and significant, walking in between his legs trying to find their graves. The third question, what does he mean by the fault is not in our stars but in ourselves? So he says that the fault is not in their stars or in their destiny, but in themselves. They are responsible for their own destiny. So he says that individuals are responsible for their own fates and actions rather than being helpless victims of destiny. The next extract is Caesar saying, "Let me have men about me that are fat, sleek-headed men, and such as sleep o' nights. Yon Cassius has a lean and hungry look. He thinks too much. Such men are dangerous." What does Antony reply to Cassius's above statement? So what does Antony says? Do not fear Cassius. He is not dangerous. He is a noble Roman and with a good disposition. The second question, what qualities of Cassius does Caesar mention that makes him dangerous? So first of all, Caesar says that he does not fear anyone, but if he does, then Cassius would be the first. He says that Cassius has a lean and hungry look. Second, he reads a lot. Third, he is a great observer. He looks through the deeds of men. And fourth, he doesn't love play and he doesn't listen to music, and such men are dangerous. Then he also says that he seldom smiles, and when he does smile, he smiles in a self-mocking way as if he scorns himself for smiling at all. So he says that such men as Cassius is never at heart's ease. Coming to the next extract where Brutus tells, I will do so, but look you, Cassius, the angry spot that glow on Caesar's brow, and all the rest look like a chidden train. Calpurnia's cheek is pale, and Cicero looks with such ferret and such fiery eyes as we have seen him in the Capitol, being crossed in conference by some senators. What has happened in the public place? Who told Cassius and Brutus what happened? So, a crown was offered to Caesar thrice by Mark Antony. He put it by with the back of his hand, each time more gently than the previous. Thus the crowd shouted each time, and this is what happened. And who gave them the description of what happened? It was Casca. Casca told them what happened. Explain the incident in detail and what had made the crowd clap and throw their sweaty hats in the air. So Mark Antony offered him a crown, which was more of a coronet, and he rejected it once. But it seemed like he really wanted it. Then Antony offered it to him again, and again Caesar rejected it. But it seemed like Caesar did not want to let go of it. Caesar was offered the crown again, and he rejected it again. The crowd jeered and clapped their hands and threw their sweaty caps in the air and made such a lot of noise because Caesar refused the crown that it almost choked Caesar. And he swooned and fell down because of it. So what happened to Caesar after that? So after the crowd jeered and clapped and threw their sweaty caps in the air and made such a lot of noise, Caesar swooned and fell down. He fell down in the marketplace and foamed at the mouth and was speechless. And that is when Brutus says that it is very likely he had fallen down because he has the falling sickness. The next question, when he realized that the crowd was glad that he refused the crown, what did he do? So before Caesar fell down, he pulled open his robe and offered them his throat to cut. And then he fainted. Once he regained consciousness, he said that before fainting, if he had done or said anything wrong, he wanted them to know that it was all due to his sickness. I hope I'm not going too fast, but this is more of like a revision for all of you to go through the question and answers. So if you feel I'm going really fast, you can pause the video or rewind and then go through it again. Coming to the next extract, Casca is saying, are you not moved when all the sway of earth shakes like a thing unfirm? O Cicero, I have seen tempest when the scolding winds have rived the naughty oaks, and I have seen the ambitious ocean swell and rage and foam. to be exalted with the threatening clouds. But never till tonight, never till now, did I go through a tempest dropping fire. So the first question is, who is Casca talking to? And what does Casca say is happening in heaven? So Casca is talking to Cicero, and he says that never until today did he experience a storm with falling fire. That is, tempest dropping fire. He says that either there are wars in heaven, or else the world is too insolent towards the gods, which provoke them to send destruction. Next is, what were the strange sights that Casca saw? So, what were the strange sights? First is, he saw a common slave who held up his left hand, which was flaming and burning like 20 torches that were combined. Yet his hand remained unscathed and he did not feel the fire. So, that was something very unusual. The second was, against the capital, he met a lion who glared at him and went away grumpily without attacking him. So, which was again something very unusual. Then there were 100 ghastly women who were transformed by fear, who swore that they saw men walking on fire in the streets, or men were all in fire and walking up and down the streets. Then, yesterday, the bird of the night, which is the owl, it sat in the marketplace at noon and it was hooting and shrieking, which is a very unnatural event. So he says that when all of this happened, he says that this is a very ominous or inauspicious thing. The next question, how is Cassius walking about in the streets in that perilous night? Cassius is walking around in the streets, exposing himself to the perilous night unbraced. Unbraced means he is not wearing his armor or any other form of protection. He is bearing his chest to the thunderbolt and he puts himself right where he thought it would strike. Now again coming to yet another important part. Brutus says it must be by his death, and for my part, I know no personal cause to spur at him, but for the general, he would be crowned. How that might change his nature, that's the question. So the first question is, why does Brutus say it's the bright day that brings forth the adder? So here Brutus is contemplating whether to assassinate Caesar. So he says that when things are at their best or when someone is at the height of power, dangers are most likely to approach. So he's saying there are hidden risks of success. That is why he says that how will success change Caesar? He doesn't know, because just as poisonous snakes tend to come out in the open on a bright sunny day, they have to walk carefully. Just like that, if they crown him, then they will be giving him powers to damage. And rulers have abused their power when they separate it from compassion. The next question, then what does his statement mean that lowliness is young ambition's ladder? Again, very, very important point. So he says that a humble behavior or humility is a tool used by ambitious people to gain power and climb to the top. But once they reach the top, he turns his back on the supporters and reaches for the skies while scorning those who helped him get where he is. Why should we think about Caesar as a serpent's egg? So here Brutus is trying to justify the conspirators' decisions to assassinate Caesar before he can be crowned. So the metaphor highlights that just as a snake is harmless in its shell, but dangerous once it hatches, Caesar must be killed before he can be powerful and dangerous. The next one. They are the faction, O conspiracy, shames thou to show thy dangerous brow by night, when evils are most free. Oh, then by day where wilt thou find a cavern dark enough to mask thy monstrous visage? Seek none, conspiracy. So, what does Brutus tell the conspirators for hiding their face at night? So, Brutus tells the conspirators that if they are ashamed to show their face at night, when evil things are most free, then when it is day, where are they going to find a cave that is dark enough to hide their monstrous face? The second one. Instead of hiding their face, what should they do? So he says that instead of hiding their face, they should hide their true intentions behind smiles and in friendliness. The next question. Why is Decius Brutus confident that he can convince Caesar to come to the capital? Decius Brutus says, just like how unicorns can be captured in trees, elephants in holes, lions with nets, bears with mirrors, Caesar can be convinced by flattery, and Decius can put him in the right mood and bring him to the capital. That is, he is going to use flattery to convince Caesar to come, and he will definitely fall for it. Again, a very important extract. Cassius says, Decius well urged. I think it is not meet Mark Antony, so well beloved of Caesar, should outlive Caesar. We shall find of him a shrewd contriver, and you know his means. If he improves them, may well stretch so far as to annoy us all, which to prevent, let Antony and Caesar fall together. The first question, what was the mistake that Brutus made here, and what were his justifications to let Antony live? So Brutus did not agree with Cassius to kill Antony along with Caesar, because what did he say? He said that our actions will appear brutal. Caesar is the head and Antony is his limbs. So he says that let us be sacrificers and not butchers. He says, let's kill Caesar boldly, not wrathfully. Let's carve him as a dish fit for the gods, not hack him as a carcass fit for the dogs. So by doing so, it will make their purpose seem necessary and not envious, and they shall be called perjurers and not murderers. He says that Antony is only the arm of Caesar and he won't be able to do anything once the head is cut off. That is, head is Caesar. So this was the biggest mistake of Brutus, to underestimate Antony. So what actions by them will make their purpose seem necessary and not envious, so that they shall be called perjurers and not murderers? So he says that Caesar must bleed for it because there's a chance that he might do wrong. But gentle friends, let's not kill Antony, because that will make our purpose necessary and not envious, which when appear to the common eyes, we shall be called perjurers and not murderers. So it's a similar answer to what we have written in the previous one. The next one, Caesar says, nor heaven nor earth have been at peace tonight. Thrice had Calpurnia in her sleep cried out, help ho, they murder Caesar, who's within. First question, what does Caesar ask the servant to do? So what does Caesar ask the servant to do? Caesar asks the servant to go tell the priest to perform a sacrifice and bring the predictions of the outcome. Second question, what were the strange sights that Calpurnia narrate to Caesar? So the first one is, they have witnessed terrifying things. such as a lioness had given birth in the streets, graves have opened and released their dead, fierce warriors have fought on the clouds in organized battle formations, and it is raining blood on the capital. The noise of the battle was heard in the air. Horses neighed and dying men groaned. The ghost shrieked and screamed in the streets. So these were the strange sights narrated by Calpurnia. Third question, when Caesar says these bad omens are to the world in general as to Caesar, what does Calpurnia reply? Calpurnia says, when poor people die, there are no comets seen in the sky, but when a prince dies, the heavens themselves will light up. So that's how she's trying to convince Caesar that these are bad omens and they are things beyond the usual experience, and that is why she fears them. Again, yet another important extract. Caesar says, cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. Of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seemed to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. So the first question, how do cowards die many a times before their death? So cowards live in a state of perpetual fear, imagining the worst scenarios, and hence suffer the mental and emotional anguish of dying repeatedly through anxiety and avoidance. But the brave face their fears head on and only experience the actual event of death once rather than living in fear of it. So please try to remember and recall this answer because again very important. What did the augurers say after the sacrifice? So the priest did not want Caesar to go out that day because when they looked inside the entrails of the sacrificed animal, they could not find the heart of it. What reference does Caesar give about two lions born on the same day? So if you remember, Caesar says that, right? So Caesar says that danger knows that he is more dangerous than it. And there are two lions that were born on the same day, and Caesar is the elder and the more fierce one, and hence he shall go out. Again, coming to another important part, Caesar says, the cause is in my will, I will not come. That is enough to satisfy the Senate, but for your private satisfaction, because I love you, I will let you know. Calpurnia here, my wife, stays me at home. She dreamt tonight. Disha says, this dream is all misinterpreted. It was a vision, fair and fortunate. So what was the dream that Calpurnia had? So Calpurnia had a dream last night that she saw Caesar's statue, which like a fountain with 100 spouts was running with pure blood. That is of Caesar. Many strong Romans came and smiled and washed their hands in it. Therefore, she takes this as a warning and as a omen of impending danger. And hence she has begged Caesar on her knees to stay home that day. The next question, how was it interpreted by Decius Brutus? So Decius Brutus interpreted the dream to be good and a lucky vision. He says that the statue spouting blood through many holes in which many smiling Romans bathed meant that Caesar would provide great Rome with sustaining blood, and that great men will strive and beg to get some token of approval from Caesar's holy blood. The next, what does he finally say to convince Caesar to actually go to the capital? He finally says that the Senate had decided to crown mighty Caesar that day And if Caesar sends the word that he won't come tonight, they might change their mind. Besides, people might also joke that the Senate would have to decide on a time when Caesar's wife would have better dreams. And they would also call Caesar a person who is afraid or fearful. Now, this convinced Caesar and he decided to go to the capital. The next extract. Here will I stand till Caesar pass along, and as a suitor will I give him this. My heart laments that virtue cannot live out of teeth of emulation. If thou reads this, O Caesar, thou mayst live. If not, the fates which traitors do contrive. So the first question, who is the person in the above lines and what does he plan to do? We all know who the person is. Artemidorus had written a letter to Caesar to warn him about the conspirators against him. He plans to stand on the way to the capital until Caesar passes by, and as a petitioner, he will give him the letter himself. Second question, how is Portia's state of mind on the Ides of March? So Portia is extremely anxious and in a state of panic and overwhelming fear for her husband Brutus. Though she is a woman of great strength, she is distressed by the knowledge of the conspirators and the potential danger that Brutus might face. Hence, she frantically sends her servant Lucius to the capital to check on Brutus, but forgetting to give Lucius a clear or a coherent message. Third, what is written in the letter addressed to Caesar by, now we know it is Artemidorus. So the letter by Artemidorus states Caesar to be aware of Brutus. Watch Cassius. Don't go near Casca. Keep an eye on Cinna. Do not trust Trebonius. To pay attention to Metellus Cimber. The Decius Brutus doesn't love him, and he had wronged Caius Ligeris. All the men share only one mind, which is against Caesar. And if Caesar is not immortal, he has to be careful. He also says, if Caesar reads this letter, he may live. But if not, the fates will conspire with the traitors. And by this, we have completed all the important extracts of Scene 1, Act 1 and Act 2. So I hope this was a good revision for you to go through all the important extracts and go through everything. So please study well, revise well. Once in a while, write all the answers so you will know if you know the answers really well or not. Also share this video among your friends. Study well. I'm praying for each one of you. You will definitely find success. God bless.